Peloton Bike Plus vs Echelon EX7s. Hey guys, Matt here at Happy TV, and in today's video we're going to cover two flagship bikes. The Echelon EX7s is a $2,000 bike, and the Peloton Bike Plus is a $2,500 bike. At the time of this video, both of these bikes are the flagship top-of-the-line bike in each of these companies' lineup. In the next few minutes here, we're going to dive in and take a closer look at both these bikes and look at the similarities and differences, but first, let me show you some of the major differences between these two bikes. The very first thing I want to show you is on the Echelon EX7s, it actually comes with SPD style pedals that you clip in on one side with an SPD option, and the other side has a generic cage style pedal, so you don't need any special sort of shoes to ride the Echelon EX7s. And beyond the simple fact that these are SPD clip-in pedals, I've noticed two significant things about these pedals over the past month or so I've been riding this bike. The first and most significant thing I noticed about these pedals is they're actually very easy to clip in and also unclip from. The Peloton Bike Plus does not come with these SPD clip-in pedals I have attached to this bike. Instead, when you buy the Peloton bike, you get this style pedal, and it requires a different style cleat on the bottom of your shoe. And one trouble point that a lot of people have with these style pedals is they are not too difficult really to clip into, but they are extremely difficult for some people to unclip from.
So I'll do it in.
Whew.
Did I kick the camera?
No, you kicked over here. I should probably back up a little
really
bit.
Hard.
In fact, they're so difficult to unclip from that we actually just changed the pedal out completely to an SPD style pedal, so we didn't have to worry about unclipping. However, the good news is about the Peloton Bike Plus is it does have a standard threading on the crank arm, so you can easily swap out the pedals and put any sort of pedal you want pretty much on this bike. It's pretty much compatible with all the common pedals. Jumping straight on back over here to the Echelon EX7s, this crank arm is not a standard thread for pedals. Instead of the standard threading that you get on the Peloton Bike Plus and most other bike pedals and crank arms, you actually get a beefed up thicker threading and diameter on this pedal threading. So from the way I see it, this really has two implications. One, if you wanted to swap out this pedal for a different pedal, you're just not going to be able to take any pedal you want pretty much, and it's not going to be compatible with this crank arm. Now the other side of the coin to this diameter of the threading being thicker on this pedal is probably a much stronger pedal. So it's probably going to be much less likely to snap off on you in the middle of a ride. And yeah, I know what you might be thinking. Pedals snap off in the middle of the ride? That sounds quite dangerous and terrifying. Yeah, you're right. And that's actually one of the big reasons why we decided not to use these pedals, is because these pedals do kind of have a reputation, and there are news stories out there about these pedals snapping off right here on the threading during a ride and causing injury to some riders. Now that's not necessarily to say this Shimano pedal isn't going to snap off on me, but I've been riding with Shimano pedals for 7 or 8 years now, and I've never had one break on me yet. But anyway, that's just one of the first things I wanted to point out to you about the differences between the Peloton Bike Plus and the Echelon EX7s. And while we're talking about pedals, I'd like to point out on these SPD style shoes, you can actually buy SPD style shoes that have a cleat that is kind of embedded down there in the sole of the shoe there. And ultimately what this means is without the big bulky attachment on the bottom like you get on the Peloton shoes and the Peloton clip-in style pedals, you can actually walk around on these shoes. So if you want to integrate off-bike workouts into your on-bike workouts, it's much easier to do with a shoe that you can actually walk on. And yes, I know my old shoe here is really ugly, but they do make much more beautiful shoes than this one. I do have shoe and pedal recommendations linked down below the video in the description box. The next major difference I want to point out to you about these two machines is the adjustability. If you've seen any of my previous videos about the Peloton Bike Plus, you know the adjustability on this bike is actually pretty excellent. However, one of the downsides is it is three-way adjustable, meaning you can move the seat forwards and backwards. The seat goes up and down. It does have micro adjustments, no holes to click into, so you can really fine-tune your measurements. The handlebars also raise and lower quite a bit, and they do have these nice soft touch handles right here. However, one of the big complaints about the Peloton Bike Plus is there is no ability to move these handlebars forwards and backwards. So yeah, this bike is only three-way adjustable. And ultimately, not being able to move the handlebars forwards and backwards can affect your comfort on the bike if you're really on the short end of the spectrum or on the really tall end of the spectrum. For most people, these handlebars probably will be fine in terms of forwards and backwards. However, it is a gripe among some users. Over here on the Echelon EX7s, this bike is actually 4-way adjustable, and it does have micro adjustments on all the adjustment points. So you can raise and lower the saddle, you can move the saddle forwards and backwards, you can also raise and lower the handlebars, and boom, look at that. You can also move the handlebars forwards and backwards. So all you need to do is loosen this adjustment knob up and you can slide these handlebars forwards and backwards, and there's actually quite a bit of adjustment there for you to move them. And then all you do is tighten them back up when you're done. So those are two pretty significant differences between these two bikes, and there are a lot more things I want to show you about the differences between these two bikes. But before we do that, I want to talk about the price. So right now at the time of this recording, the least expensive price I can find for the Echelon EX7s is actually on Amazon.com. It's like just a tick under $2,000, and it also has a quicker ship time listed. So right now on the Amazon listing for the Echelon EX7s, the ship time is listed at about 5 to 7 days. On the other hand, I checked out the official Echelon website and the price was like $40 more, and also it said the ship time might be 6 to 8 weeks. So right now at the time of this recording, the Peloton Bike Plus is right at about $2,500, and on both these bikes you do have to join the respective platform, which is about $39 per month on each of these bikes, but I do want to dive into more detail on that because there is a pretty big difference. So first and foremost, on the Peloton Bike Plus, basically if you join the all access membership, that cost is like $39 per month, and pretty much the only way you can do it is pay $39 per month on a recurring monthly basis. There's no way to really get a discount on that membership. On the other hand, on the Echelon bike, you can actually choose to pay that on a monthly basis or a annual basis, or you can even pay for 2 years up front. So one of the big differences, instead of only being able to pay on a monthly basis, you can actually get a discount by buying more time up front. So I will put a link below this video in the description box to the Amazon listing for the Echelon EX7s, and they break down all the pricing discounts you can get there. Basically the way it works is the more time you commit to your Echelon membership up front, the better price you're gonna get. The other big thing I wanna talk about is the equipment that both these companies make. So right now at the time of this recording, Peloton has their bikes and their treadmills. They don't have a rower yet, but there is definitely a strong rumor that a rowing machine will be coming to Peloton sometime in the future. And also, I would not be one bit surprised if Peloton has some other stuff in the works in terms of fitness equipment for the future. On the other hand, Echelon already has more fitness equipment out there. So they have a rowing machine, they have multiple rowing machines, as well as they also have their Reflect, which is like a mirror style workout platform. So I guess the point I'm getting to here is for both of these platforms, you do have that monthly recurring cost. However, Echelon does have more equipment in their lineup. So if you're already in on Echelon, say you have that rowing machine, say you have their Reflect, or their treadmill, and you're already using other pieces of equipment, you can actually get the Echelon membership and use that across more of your equipment. And yes, of course, both of these platforms do have lots of off equipment workouts, like meditation and yoga and strength training, just using weights, standing in your home with no equipment other than your actual weights. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that both of these bikes do have a required membership to be able to use the screen and all of the services integrated with their respective platforms. But hey, we're not done comparing these two bikes yet, so let's get back to that now. So in just a few moments here, we're gonna take a closer look at these two screens because they are similar, however they are different. One is bigger and they do both rotate, however they rotate in different ways. But before we do that, let's first take a look at the flywheels and drivetrains. From a distance here, the first thing that you can really notice, the obvious difference between these two bikes, is the Peloton Bike Plus has the flywheel in the front of the bike, and the Echelon EX7s has the flywheel on the back of the bike. Now, based on all of my experience riding these indoor cycling bikes, I cannot tell a difference at all in terms of where the flywheel is located on the bike in terms of the feel of riding the bike. However, one big impact that the location of the flywheel has on the bike is the sweat drip zone. So when you're riding the Echelon EX7s, your sweat will just fall straight down onto the floor, whereas on the Peloton Bike Plus, since the flywheel is located in the front of the bike, you do have more potential to get sweat down onto the flywheel. In terms of flywheel mass, I believe the Peloton Bike Plus and the standard Peloton bike have a 38-pound flywheel. Now this information is not published and easy to find, so I don't know if that's 100% accurate or not. However, based on hearsay and rumor and really just experience with the bike, it does feel like it's about 38 pounds. On the other hand, the Echelon EX7s has a perimeter weighted 32-pound flywheel. So you can see the shape of this flywheel, it kind of flares out there towards the edge. So it kind of gets that mass on the outer edge, giving this flywheel potentially more momentum at a smaller mass. Taking a look at the Peloton Bike Plus flywheel, it is a thin disc and it appears to be some sort of mass located here, and you can see the same thing on the other side of the flywheel. In terms of drivetrain feel on both of these bikes, they are both excellent feeling bikes, and I will get on the two and compare them in just a moment. But before we do that, I have to show you one other significant difference between these two bikes. So yes, these are both magnetic resistance bikes, and they are both belt driven, and they both have digital resistance. So what I mean by that is when you turn the resistance knob on the Echelon EX7s, there's no physical connection that's moving those magnets. It actually operates a motor, and the motor moves the magnets. On the Peloton Bike Plus, you get this exact same feature where there is a digital motor moving the magnets. When you turn this, there's no physical connection to the magnets. If you listen carefully, you can hear the motor working. And from the moment you turn that resistance knob, the reaction time is actually pretty good. On the Peloton Bike Plus, you can see the exact same thing happening. There's basically no lag at all when I turn this, and you can hear. So here's the really big difference between these two resistance systems right now at the time of this recording. The Peloton Bike Plus has an automatic adjusting resistance feature on the bike. So when you're doing rides, the resistance on this bike will automatically change for you if you enable that feature. Over here on the Echelon EX7s, at the time of this recording, right now when I'm making this video, this bike does not have automatic adjusting resistance enabled. However, it does have digital magnetic resistance, so it would in theory be possible to implement this through the software. I don't know why for sure this is not enabled. So really all this means is you don't get automatic adjusting resistance on the Echelon EX7s, whereas on the Peloton Bike Plus, which is about $500 more, you do get automatic adjusting resistance. So everything I just said about that automatic adjusting resistance and auto follow, that was just at the time of this recording. Please check the links below this video in the description box because there is rumors that, that may be coming to the Echelon in the future. After all, with the digital magnetic resistance, it is possible. It just needs to be implemented. So real quick, I want to point out some minor things, like there are weight holders back here, dual weight holders on the back of the Echelon EX7s. The saddle on this bike is firm. I actually really like the saddle on this bike. Some people, if you don't like a firm saddle, you might not like it, or you may love it. It really just depends on your personal preferences. So up here on the front of the bike, you do get dual water bottle holders. They are this nice rubber coated material, and they are, in a pretty nice place up here. It's pretty easy and conveniently located here up by the front of the handlebars. You can reach in there and grab either of your two water bottles. Again, another thing that we should point out is those water bottle holders are placed up here where the flywheel is not located. Over here on the Peloton Bike Plus, you get your water bottles right there above the flywheel, so you could get spills down in the drivetrain. Now, that's not really a big concern. I've never really spilled anything down there in the flywheel. However, it is possible. Another thing I should point out is these are kind of like a smoked out gray plastic material. And on my particular Peloton Bike Plus, I have the old metal weight holders on the back of the bike. However, I know some of the new Peloton Bike Pluses are coming with like a plastic style weight holder on the back. The saddle on the Peloton Bike Plus is great. I like it. It's firm, narrow. That's just my preference. Some people probably will not like the saddle at all. Just like, some people might not like the saddle on the Echelon bike either. Of course, saddle is always a personal preference, and a lot of the time it really just takes some getting used to before you're comfortable on any bike. And before we take a look at the screens, I just want to show you the handlebars real quick. Peloton Bike Plus has a flat grip here, nice and thick, rubber coated material. I really like the handlebars on the Peloton Bike Plus. Also has this position here, you get this position, and position 3 for out of the saddle. Good handlebars on this bike. On the Echelon EX7s, the handlebars are a little bit different. I do like these handlebars as well. They're just different. So you kind of get like a big wide area to put your hands on down here. There's a little bit of arch to it, but I actually really like the big surface area you get to put your hand on. Also, you get this position up here to put your hands on, here, position 2 here, and a nice position 3 for out of the saddle riding. And of course, if you skip past it in my previous section, these handlebars do have the ability to move forwards and backwards, whereas the Peloton Bike Plus, as well as the standard Peloton bike, do not have the ability to move those handlebars forwards and backwards. Okay, so now let's start talking about the screens, the speaker systems, and what you got going up here on the dashboard. So on the Echelon EX7s, you get this massive, totally sufficient 22-inch touchscreen, and it rotates. On the Peloton Bike Plus, you get this massive 24-inch touchscreen that rotates. So on the Peloton Bike Plus, that costs $500 more, you do get a bigger screen by 2 inches. So the question is, does 2 inches make a difference? On either one of these bikes, when I'm in the saddle up here riding, I feel like the screen size on either one of these bikes is totally sufficient. So in the past, I have reviewed other bikes, in particular the Echelon EX4s, which comes with a 10-inch screen, and you know, a 10-inch screen I feel like is just maybe a little bit too small, but you know, 22 inches, 24 inches, totally sufficient. Great size screens right here in your face. It's great. One of the big differences between these two screens, however, is how they rotate. So the Peloton Bike Plus screen actually rotates like this, and you have to actually tilt the whole thing forward like this so it'll clear the handlebars as you rotate it around. And well, we're gonna clash over here and run into this bike. Okay, I moved the whole bike back, and yeah, this whole thing will just rotate around 180 degrees this way, and then it stops in the middle. And if you wanna go back the other way, you have to just rotate it back this way. And that's probably just so the cables don't get tangled up in there. In terms of tilting this screen up, it can tilt up quite a bit, and also it can tilt down just a little bit down. The screen on the Echelon EX7s rotates, however, it does not rotate side to side. Instead, it rotates over the top here, and the whole image will just kind of flip once you get it to about there. So on the Echelon EX7s, when you flip the screen over, if you want to do your off-bike workouts, you're pretty much limited to doing that in front of the bike. On the Peloton Bike Plus, you get a little bit more flexibility. So, you know, depending on how your bike is set up, the Peloton Bike Plus definitely has a little bit better versatility in terms of location of where you're gonna work out off the bike. One thing the Echelon EX7s has going for it is there is no obstruction to the screen hitting the handlebars in any way, rotating the screen when you rotate it over. Peloton Bike Plus, you just have to be careful not to smash your screen on the handlebars. In terms of resolution and what the picture looks like on each of these displays, they're both perfectly sufficient. 1080p is the resolution you get, and it's totally sufficient for what these bikes are for. The Peloton Bike Plus has a little camera right up here. You can also cover it and uncover it. The Echelon EX7s also has a camera. So let's take a little bit to talk about the sound systems on each of these two machines. So they both have forward-facing speakers. This is the forward-facing speaker here on the Peloton Bike Plus. On the Echelon EX7s, you also get forward-facing speakers. You can see one here, and there's also one over on this side. However, in terms of the onboard speakers on each of these bikes, the Peloton Bike Plus really shines. You know, it really has a really good sound system, because not only does it have those front-facing speakers, there's also subwoofers, you know, speakers on the back of this bike. And in terms of sound quality, it's really just a lot better on the Peloton Bike Plus. The Echelon EX7s does have a sound system. It's just not quite as beefed up as the Peloton Bike Plus sound system. And actually the sound system on the Peloton Bike Plus is so loud, I don't actually even use it in my apartment. Instead, I use the 3.5mm headphone jack right here to plug in my headphones, because, you know, it's just a lot more conducive to apartment living. And also on the Echelon EX7s, there is a headphone jack right here where you can plug your headphones in. And that's exactly what I do, I guess because I'm old school. However, both of these bikes do have Bluetooth audio connections as well. So if you have wireless headphones, or you want to hook up, you know, a Bluetooth audio system, you can do that on either one of these bikes. So let's take a moment to look at some of the metrics that each of these bikes gives you. So they both give you all the good metrics. You know, you get your cadence, you get your resistance, you get your power output, you get your total kilojoules, you get your calories, speed, and distance. And of course, you can connect up your external heart rate monitor with your Bluetooth right here. So you basically just connect it up, and it shows your heart rates and your zones right here with this graphical representation here of what zone you're in, and it works very nicely. Over here on the Peloton Bike Plus, you also get your heart rate. Just connect up your same exact heart rate, you know, same way right there. And then down here, you get your metrics as well. So you get your cadence, your power output, your resistance, distance, total output, calories, speed, all the good stuff. In addition to that, on the Peloton Bike Plus, you also get your FTP zones after you do the FTP test. So on the bottom of the screen on the Peloton Bike Plus, you do get your power zones displayed. The Peloton Bike Plus is measured on a resistance scale from 1 all the way up to 100, while Echelon measures from 1 to 32. Also, I should mention that both of these bikes do have the ability to give you a live leaderboard for your rides. One feature that the Peloton Bike Plus has that the Echelon EX7 does not have is the Apple Gym Kit feature, which allows you to connect your Apple Watch up to the Peloton bike. Personally, I do not have an Apple Watch, so this is not a big deal to me. I just use my Scosche Rhythm Plus, and that works just fine. In just a moment, I'm going to hop on both these bikes and give you a little comparison between the two, but let's first take a look at some of these specs here. So on the Echelon, the max user weight is listed at 325 pounds, whereas the Peloton bike is listed at 297 pounds. However, I think that's definitely a conservative measurement on the Peloton Bike Plus. I don't see any reason why either one of these machines would have a higher weight capacity than the other. In terms of weight, the Peloton Bike Plus does weigh 140 pounds, whereas the Echelon EX7s weighs 124 pounds. In terms of the footprint there, you can see it listed, but really to me, just looking at them, they're both really about the same size. The max user height listed for the Peloton Bike Plus is actually only 6'4", but I'm 6'5", and I easily fit on this bike, and I do believe that they're definitely being conservative on the measurements for max height on the Peloton Bike Plus. The maximum height for the Echelon EX7s is listed at 6'8". For the Echelon EX7s, the minimum height is listed at 4'5", whereas on the Peloton Bike Plus, minimum height is listed at 4'11". However, I really can't give you too much of input on this because I'm 6'5". Both of these machines can work with wired internet or wireless internet. However, on the Peloton Bike Plus, you do need to have a USB-C adapter, I believe. There's not a direct Ethernet connection on the Peloton Bike Plus. On the Echelon EX7s, you do get an Ethernet connection as well as an on-off switch and a port to plug in your power here on the back. And one kind of neat thing about the Echelon EX7s is it also has a power port up here on the front of the bike. So you have options where you want to plug in your power. You don't need to plug it in the back or the front. You get to choose. So ultimately, this allows you to hide your cables better depending on where you have your bike placed in your home. The Peloton Bike Plus simply has this one port back here to plug in the power. There is a power button on the Peloton Bike Plus right up here to turn on and off the screen, and the USB-C connection would be right here if you wanted to hook up wired internet. The Echelon EX7s has your volume adjusters and the power button for the screen right here. And underneath the screen, you also get an HDMI port, an additional audio jack. There is a SD card, a reset button, a USB port, as well as a DC out. In case you were wondering, the volume rockers are on the side of the screen on the Peloton Bike Plus. Also, I should mention I do not have problems on either one of these bikes in terms of Wi-Fi connectivity, so I have not used the hardwired connection on either one of these bikes because it simply just has not been necessary. My Wi-Fi works fine on either bike. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of hop on both these bikes back to back and give you my raw, unfiltered thoughts on, how they compare, how the max resistance compares, and minimum resistance, and just drivetrain feel in general. But hey, real quick before we do that, can we take a moment to appreciate how good my plants are doing? Give me a quick thumbs up if you appreciate my hard work keeping these things alive and well. So I'm going to hop on the Echelon EX7s first. I have the saddle height on max height, handlebars on max height, handlebars are all the way forward, and seat is all the way forward. Hopping on the Echelon EX7s, one of the first things I always notice about getting on this bike is how easy it is to clip in these pedals, and more importantly, how easy it is to unclip from these pedals. So clipping in on the Echelon EX7s is a breeze. My shoes just pop right in and pop right out of these pedals. Super easy, effortless, way easier than the standard stock pedals that come on the Peloton Bike Plus. However, I did change the pedals. So I'm just on this bike right now on minimum resistance, resistance 1. There's a very small whine to the drivetrain. Totally normal. Peloton Bike Plus basically has like the same exact noise. In terms of comfort on this bike, I feel totally comfortable on it. The drivetrain on this bike feels really nice. Like the flywheel has like a good amount of momentum to it. So like when I stop pedaling on the saddle, the drivetrain flywheel will carry my mass through the next pedal stroke very smoothly and uniform. minimum resistance on the Echelon bike is very, very minimal. I don't really see a reason or a need why anybody would need a resistance lower than the minimum on this bike. So now what I'm going to do is add on a little bit of resistance on the Echelon bike. That turned up to resistance 6 pretty quickly. Really no lag to speak of. It's, maybe a small amount of lag, but very minimal on the Echelon EX7s. So turning it from resistance 1 to 6 didn't really make like a huge difference. So let me give it another turn there. That turned up to 10. Still not like a huge difference in resistance, but I can start to feel it coming on like gradually. So resistance 10 is kind of like a, flat road, easy resistance. I'll turn it up some more here. That's 14. It's starting to come on more and more. 16, a little bit more difficult. 19, now it's starting to get up there. Max resistance on this bike is 32. So I'll just work my way up here a little bit. Jumping from resistance 19 to 22 there made a pretty big jump. Let me go back down to 19. So yeah, it's a pretty big jump going from like 18-ish to 23. So right now this feels kind of like a medium effort right now. Cadence is like 66. Let me get that up a little bit. So cadence now is 91, resistance 19, power output is 150. So let me add on a little bit of resistance here. That's 22. This is pretty difficult. 24 resistance now. 27 resistance, and this starts to get really heavy, really quick. 29, 31, max resistance 32. Let's get out of stat a little bit. Cadence 55, 56. Power output is 288. So yeah, really high max resistance here. Overall, the drivetrain feel on the Echelon EX7s is really good. I like the feel of this bike. It's a great feeling bike to ride. But now let's hop on over to the Peloton Bike Plus and see how it compares head to head. And again, let me show you how easy it is to unclip. So you don't need to worry about snapping your leg off on the Echelon EX7s pedal system. So hopping onto the Peloton Bike Plus here, clipping in, it's not really a fair comparison because these are aftermarket pedals on this bike, but the stock pedals that come on the Peloton Bike Plus are a lot more difficult to clip into and unclip from than the Echelon EX7s.
So I'll do in.
These Shimano pedals that I have on here, they're totally acceptable, totally fine, easy to clip in and unclip. But, they're not the stock pedals that come on the Peloton bike. So on the Peloton Bike Plus, first thing I can notice starting to turn the pedals over is the flywheel mass of this drivetrain. It is a little bit higher, so I can tell it does take more effort to get the pedals turning over from a stop. Also on minimum resistance now, I'm on resistance 0. Very minimal resistance. It does kind of feel like the flywheel is kind of carrying through the pedals a little bit more in terms of momentum than on the Echelon EX7s, and that is probably due to the flywheel mass being slightly higher on the Peloton Bike Plus. Onto the saddle on minimum resistance here. It's really just too light resistance. I'm going to crank up the resistance a little bit here. Peloton Bike Plus, I will say, you can tell the resistance does change a little bit snappier. It's quicker to go from I just went from resistance 0 to 30 very quickly. So I'm on resistance 30 right now. If I crank it down, that brought me down to 3. And this turn, I'm already back up to 36. So resistance does change a little bit quicker on the Peloton Bike Plus in comparison to the Echelon EX7s. Is that important to you? I mean, if you're going to be doing a lot of high intensity interval training where you're changing resistances a lot, could be important. I do think the speed in which the resistance changes on both bikes is definitely acceptable. Peloton Bike Plus is definitely just a little bit quicker to adjust that resistance. So here on the Peloton Bike Plus, I'm on resistance 44 now. 52, 62 is pretty heavy. Honestly, when I'm riding this bike, I'm usually in the range between like 40 and 60. So max resistance, let's crank it on up towards that direction. 75, 80, 96, 100. So max resistance on the Peloton Bike Plus. My cadence is like 41, power output 325, 330. First impressions, I'd have to say max resistance on the Peloton Bike Plus is higher than the Echelon max resistance. However, for normal riding, I would say max resistance on either of these bikes is definitely sufficient. When I'm doing a normal aerobic class on either one of these bikes, I don't get anywhere near the maximum resistance. So, I don't think that the max resistance would be lacking on either of these bikes for like a normal person, unless you're like Lance Armstrong or something, then maybe you would need to have like a really high max resistance. But yeah, in like a normal workout, I'd say I never really surpassed like resistance of like 70 on the Peloton Bike Plus, and on the Echelon, probably never higher than like 28. So drivetrain feel on the Peloton Bike, it's great, it's smooth. It's probably a little bit quieter than the Echelon EX7s. However, both of these bikes are actually very, very quiet machines in general. Both of them do have like a little bit of a whine, but it's pretty minimal, and they're both very quiet bikes. So hopping straight back on over here to the Echelon EX7s, I just really want to compare that maximum resistance real quick, because I do know that, get settled in here. So yeah, resistance 28, 32. Yeah, I'd have to say max resistance on the Peloton Bike Plus is definitely higher than the Echelon EX7s. However, this is like a sufficient max resistance, I would say, for like most people. Yeah, so like this is really hard to do. My cadence is 48, and I'm like trying really hard. So I don't think like a normal person would really be able to kind of like fully utilize the max resistance on the Echelon EX7s, and definitely not on the Peloton Bike Plus either. So cranking that resistance down towards the minimum end of the spectrum, resistance 1 on the Echelon bike, I can definitely tell it's easier to kind of get that flywheel turning over because it's a little bit lighter than the Peloton Bike Plus. But both these bikes are like perfectly acceptable in terms of drivetrain feel. They're both great feeling bikes to ride, and I like them both. Okay, so let me leave you with my final thoughts on the Echelon EX7s versus the Peloton Bike Plus. So obviously both these bikes are not inexpensive bikes, and they also both have that monthly recurring membership fee associated with them. Right now on Amazon, you can buy the Echelon EX7s for about $2,000 and have it delivered in about 1 week. I do have a link below this video in the description box so you can check the current ship times and if there's any current promotions going on. The Peloton Bike Plus, on the other hand, is about $500 more, and I'm not really sure what the current ship time is on the Peloton Bike Plus. I do know they did have some delays a while back, but they are working on fixing that. So really, both these bikes are quality machines. They both have a good flywheel, good feeling drivetrain, good feeling max resistance, good feeling minimum resistance, good resistance range, and they're both quality machines. They both have nice displays that are definitely sufficient for on-bike workouts and off-bike workouts, and you can rotate both the displays and do off-bike workouts as well as on-bike workouts. The clip-in pedals that come on the Echelon EX7s are definitely a lot easier to clip into, and they also have the K-style pedals on the Echelon EX7s, making it, more beginner friendly, if you don't have those clip-in style shoes that come with the Peloton Bike Plus. Also, I do know a lot of people have trouble clipping in and unclipping from the Peloton Bike Plus, but of course you can swap out those pedals to any pedals you would like because there is standard threading on the Peloton Bike Plus crank arms. And another big thing about the Echelon EX7s is the EX7s is actually a 4-way adjustable bike, so you can move those handlebars forwards and backwards, and that is a really nice feature in terms of getting comfortable on the bike. So personally, for me at my height, I don't really have a problem with the adjustments on the Peloton Bike Plus. However, I do know that people probably on the short end and the really, really tall end of the spectrum might want that ability to move the handlebars forwards and backwards to get more comfortable on the bike. Right now at the time of this recording, Peloton basically has their bike and the treadmill, and that is their two main pieces of equipment. While on the other hand, Echelon, they have a rowing machine, they have their bikes, they have the tread, they have the reflect. So, you know, if you're looking at getting more out of your membership, that monthly recurring membership price, and you have other pieces of equipment, you know, say you have the Echelon rower, say you have the Reflect or treadmill as well, it probably makes a lot of sense to get in that same ecosystem and use the Echelon EX7s rather than going out and, you know, and using the Peloton Bike Plus separate membership along with, you know, say your Echelon rower or, you know, the Reflect that you already have. On the other hand, you know, if you already have like a Peloton treadmill and you're kind of already accustomed to using Peloton, it probably makes a lot of sense to go with a Peloton Bike. If you're not accustomed to the Echelon app or the Peloton app and you just don't have any experience with either one, I'd probably encourage you to download the apps, you know, get a free trial on each one and kind of feel it out, you know, see which one kind of appeals to you more, because they are very similar and also very different in a lot of different ways. And it's something that you really can't explain. It's something you just got to kind of experience for yourself to see which appeals to you more, because some people are going to like Peloton better and some people are going to like Echelon better. They're both great platforms and they both have great instructors. They're both going to encourage you and motivate you to work out, stay consistent, and really it's pretty similar format on each of the apps. So really my bottom line is these are both quality machines, and I think that you would be happy mechanically with either one of these bikes, but it's really just going to kind of come down to which do you prefer, Peloton app or Echelon app, because you can't really run the Peloton app on the Echelon bike and you can't really run the Echelon app on the Peloton bike. So you got to make up your mind, what platform do you want, and go from there. Anyway, that's pretty much my summary of the Echelon EX7s versus the Peloton Bike Plus. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below with any questions or comments that I can answer for you, and I'll try and get back to you. Click that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in my next video.